Hey y'all, I'm Carrie,
Hey y'all, I'm Mandy.
and this is Monstrous.
This episode contains topics and language that may not be suitable for all listeners, and topics that may be triggering for some. Listener discretion is advised.
So this is the last week of Black History Month, and of course, I wanted to finish the month off strong. So, in my search for a case that would fit with the other cases that we've done so far, as well as be a story that needed to be told, I actually found two.
Okay.
And both I felt fit extremely well with everything we've covered this month, and I also kind of felt drawn to them in a way. I couldn't decide which one to cover. So instead of doing just one, I'm going to tell you both.
Okay.
So this episode may end up being a little bit longer than normal, but I feel that both need to be told, and there's no time like the present. So both of these cases are really fucked up. And from what I could see, they're not really covered in the podcast world. So we're going to do them. One of our cases today involves a double murder, while the other is about a kidnapping and rape, with both ending in wrongful convictions that put a 17 and 41-year-old behind bars for a combined time of 47 years. So, everyone get ready and hold on to your butts, because both of these cases are doozies, and they're going to outrage most, if not all of you. So our first case takes us to Kansas City, Kansas, on April 15th, 1995. On this day, at about 2 p.m., two men, Donald Ewing and Donnell Quinn, who were cousins, are sitting in a residential neighborhood outside of one of the homes in a parked car. Witnesses recalled seeing a black man dressed in all black walk down a small hill through a vacant lot and up to a parked car. Witnesses then watched as this unknown man, without warning, raised a pump-action shotgun and fired into the passenger side window. In one swift moment, the man fired the gun, then fled back up the hill. Witnesses stated that atop that hill, the man got into the passenger seat of an older model Chevy, and then they saw the car speed away. Donnell Quinn was a 21-year-old father of a 6-month-old baby boy. He died at the scene.
That's so sad.
Donald Ewing was 34 years old, and he died later that afternoon. Now, with both men dead, a double murder investigation is underway, and Roger Golubsky is the lead detective. Let me tell you, I had to watch news clippings to figure out how to pronounce his name. Yeah, because it's Golubski.
Yeah, that's weird.
So I had to look it up to make sure I said it right. Okay, anyway. So Golubsky questioned every witness that he could find, and one of these witnesses was a 21-year-old woman named Nico Quinn. Nico had been walking to her mother's house at the time of the shooting and was related to the victims. She told Golubsky that if she had saw the shooter again, she'd be able to identify him. That's how close she was when the shooting took place.
Damn.
So the next witness we have is 27-year-old Ruby Mitchell. She lived close to the scene. In fact, the shooting happened almost directly outside of her front door.
Oh, that would be crazy.
She described the shooter as having slicked back hair and brown skin. Ruby said that he looked like a boy that her niece had once dated named Lamont, but she could not remember his last name. So with this eyewitness account, Detective Golubsky drove Ruby to the station for a photo lineup of 5 different men. where Ruby pointed to the shooter, which Nico had corroborated. This man was Lamonte McIntyre. Following this identification, Lamonte was arrested and charged with both murders. Ultimately, Lamonte was convicted of the double murder of Donnell and Donald. The court then hands down 2 consecutive life sentences. So, I've referred to Lamonte a few times as the man or a man. But at the time of the double murder, the trial, and his conviction, Lamonte was only 17 years old.
Oh, wow. He's young.
Yep. And this was not the end of Lamonte's story, but instead the beginning of his nightmare. So this is Lamonte's story, and the story of how several individuals in power knowingly orchestrated his imprisonment. So in 1994, Lamonte McIntyre is a tall, skinny 17-year-old teen with dreams of becoming a comedian. He is very close with his family. He works part-time at Fifi's Diner with his mom and is a skilled barber, cutting his family and friends' hair since he was only 11 years old. On April 15th, the day of the murders, Lamonte was supposed to be at a nearby college attending GED classes. But instead, he decided to skip that day and go hang out with his cousin at his aunt's house. At the time of the murders, Lamonte was more than a mile away, going from one family member's house to another. So he was kind of in between places.
Right.
But it was over a mile away from the scene. So despite Lamonte not being near the crime scene, police had showed up at his family home looking for him. But they wouldn't say why. Just that they wanted to talk to him. So Lamonte and his mom, Rose, who, once they were told the police were looking for him, they head down to the station to clear it up. Lamonte had recently missed a court date for a drug possession charge, so they figured that that's what they were looking for him for. So they're expecting to go down to the station, talk to police, and get the whole thing cleared up. Neither of them were aware of the double murder or that Lamonte was the prime suspect. So once they arrive, Lamonte goes in to speak with Detective Golubsky. Rose knew Golubsky, and she knew a very dark side of him. One that he kept secret for a long time. Roger Golubsky had aggressively pursued Rose in the past.
Oh, God.
Yep. You see there where this is going.
Right.
So one time in particular, he had asked her to come down to the station for what seemed like no reason. But she went. Once she was there, he brought her into his office where he sexually assaulted her. Rose knew she couldn't turn him in because it was her word against his. A black woman versus a white man. The top cop. So who would she turn him into? Who would believe her?
That's crazy.
Even after Golubsky assaulted her, his obsession with her did not wane. He continued to harass her for sex, but she denied him every time. She had even moved and changed her phone number. But still, he found out both, and no matter what she did, his harassment continued. And so now, here she is in what is an extremely difficult situation. She now has to cooperate with and trust the department that employs her abuser.
There's no way.
So even with this happening, though, Rose later said, quote, "I believed in the system. They said give them 15 minutes, and I did." The next thing she knows, they are taking her 17-year-old son into custody, where he will remain for the next 23 years.
Wow.
So Lamonte's trial took place 5 months after his initial arrest, which is really fast for a murder trial. But for a double murder trial, it's nearly unheard of, and it's extremely concerning.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah. Very, very fast. Most trials take at least a year. Murder trials take even longer to go to trial.
Right.
5 months. Yep. So the judge overseeing the trial was J. Baxter Burdett, and the lead prosecutor was a woman named Tara Moorhead, whose case depended solely on the investigation that was headed by Detective Golubsky. And I want to be clear, the case against Lamont was extremely weak, practically non-existent. There was no physical evidence, no murder weapon, no prints at the crime scene, and there was no blood on any of Lamont's clothes or other possessions. In fact, there wasn't any clothes, evidence, or personal items of anyone that was involved in the case so far that resulted in any kind of evidence. Yeah. Mandy's just shaking her head for everyone that can't see her.
Because that's insane.
Yep.
Like they had nothing.
Nope. Nothing at all. To make it worse, Detective Golubsky didn't obtain a single search warrant for anyone or anything during his entire investigation. Yep.
Wow.
Yep. So they obviously knew that there was no evidence. Even without a search warrant, it's very clear. But
right.
If he would have obtained just one search warrant, Golubsky would have found out that Lamont had no connection to either victim. There was no connection whatsoever.
So they didn't know each other or anything?
Nope. The only thing that the prosecution had were eyewitness statements. Their entire case was only the accounts of Ruby Mitchell and Nico Quinn. Nothing else. And we all know how shaky eyewitness statements are to begin with.
Right.
They are extremely unreliable. You have to have corroborating evidence. But then you add in the fact that both of these women just witnessed a double murder. I'm not saying they're not credible, but their eyewitness statements are going to be kind of shaky anyway.
Yeah, because they're going to be traumatized.
Exactly. So Lamont knows that he's innocent, right? So he pleads not guilty. He is not worried at all because how could he be found guilty if he didn't do it? And if they had nothing proving that he did. Lamont had 5 different people that could and did corroborate his alibi. They all got on the stand and testified that Lamont was in a completely different part of town at the time the murders happened. Family members further went on to say on the stand that Lamont was not wearing an all-black outfit that day, which both eyewitnesses said the shooter was wearing. But even with all of that, the defense's case goes sideways real fast. So Lamont had a court-appointed attorney, as most do in these cases.
Right.
His name was Gary Long. And no shock here, but he had 0 experience with double murder cases. And to make it worse, at the time of the trial, Gary Long was on supervised probation for failing to properly represent 3 previous clients. This is one of those, I can't.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way this is real. But it is.
Right.
Yep. So even though Lamont knew all of this, he refused to take a plea deal. He later said, quote, "I was innocent. I thought the truth would come out and everything will be okay." But he soon learned that he was wrong. His trial took only 4 days.
4 days.
4 days.
For a double murder.
Yep. From start to finish. 4 days. So then the jury came back with their verdict. Lamonte McIntyre is guilty on 2 counts of murder and was sentenced to 2 life sentences, as I said before. Lamont was transferred to prison, and immediately he began writing to innocent groups, including one based out of New Jersey called Centurion, which investigates wrongful convictions like Lamont. So Centurion was founded in 1980 by Jim McCluskey. And since then, they have freed 70 wrongfully convicted men and women that were either serving life sentences or that were sitting on death row.
Oh, wow.
Yep. Lamont had come across an article about the nonprofit organization in 2001, and he decided to send them a letter, to which I'm going to read you part of it. Quote, I'm 100% innocent of the crime I'm doing time for. I've been doing my best trying to prove that. I have no money, and I don't know where to go from here, so I'm asking for your help. If you could just look at my case, you would see I shouldn't be here.
And he's right. If somebody would look at it, because there's no evidence or anything.
Nope. So, that's what Jim does. He takes a look. He reads everything on it, everything that they have anyway, and he agrees that Lamont should not be in prison. And so, he takes on the task of proving his innocence. So, between 2009 and 2010, 15 years after Lamont's conviction, Jim travels to Kansas City and starts talking to witnesses, as well as people that knew Donald, Donnell, and Lamont. Because there were people that knew all three. There were some that only knew one. So he went to Kansas City and spoke to everyone. From this, one thing became very clear to him, and it was that no one believed that Lamont was the one that committed the murders. While talking to all these people, one name came up a lot, and that was Cecil Brooks, a notorious Kansas City drug dealer and convicted murderer. So at this time, Cecil is in prison doing time for an unrelated crime. Jim goes and he pays him a visit, which Cecil had agreed to. Once Jim arrives, they sit down and talk. Cecil tells Jim that there is a teenager who goes by the name Monster, and he is the one that killed Donald and Donnell over a dispute about drugs. Cecil says he knows this because he's the one that ordered the hit. Cecil then signs an affidavit confirming what he had told Jim. Yeah.
That's wild.
Now, Centurion connects Lamont with a new lawyer named Cheryl Pilot. Jim and Cheryl are not the only ones fighting for Lamont, though. They are joined by retired detective Mark Bussell and by the Midwest Innocence Project. Their combined work exposes how the case against Lamont is even flimsier than what it originally was believed to be. So, like I said before, the original case hinged on the testimony of Ruby Mitchell and Nico Quinn. So, the team takes a look at their testimony. Nico Quinn didn't identify Lamont as the shooter until after she saw a photo of him. Then she even stated that she felt uncomfortable and as if she had been manipulated into making that identification. While questioning her, Detective Roger Golubsky lied to her, saying the shooter had already been arrested and that police had discovered the murder weapon. Nico further said the officer accompanying Golubsky had his thumb on one of the photos in the lineup as if he was pointing to Lamont's photo. Turns out you can't do that, my guy.
Right. That's not allowed.
No. Before the trial, here's the kicker. Before the trial, Nico had never seen Lamont in person.
What?
She had no idea who he was. And when she did see him, she knew he was innocent. One look at him in person, and she knew he was not the shooter because he looked nothing like the man she saw that day. Before she was brought in to testify, she had even told the prosecutor, Tara Moorhead, twice that she had made the wrong identification. She told her he was not the man she had seen that day. And to this, Moorhead told her, it's a direct quote, okay, these are not my words. Quote, if you don't do what we discussed, I'll throw your black ass in jail. I'll send the police to your kids and you'll never see them again.
What the fuck?
Yep. Yeah. And she did that because Nico did have a pretty checkered past. She had some run-ins, had some issues when it came to her kids, and Moore had used that to get her to say what she wanted her to say. Yeah. So with those threats in her face, Nico was forced to comply. She had to do what she was told. So she perjured herself, testifying that Lamont was the shooter. She was left with no choice in this. She was stuck between a rock and a hard place. So then they moved to Ruby Mitchell's testimony. She was the woman that had given Lamont's first name to detectives the day of the shooting. Remember, that's all she gave was his first name. Because she couldn't remember his last name. I mean, there could be 1,000 Lamonts out there. You don't know. In the photo lineup shown to Ruby, only one of them was named Lamont. Can you guess which one it was?
What?
It was Lamonte McIntyre. So, of course, she pointed to him.
Right.
That's not even the worst part. In the photo lineup, Golubsky included photos of Lamont's brothers and one of his cousins. Yeah, that's not how lineups work.
Right.
The people in the lineups is supposed to be a 6-man photo array, and they are all supposed to look similar.
Right.
If you do it in person, after they, arrest the suspect, typically the other people look like the suspect, but they're usually officers, things like that. But they look similar. They fit the description. These are his brothers and his cousins. Of course, they're going to look similar.
Yeah.
KCUR reported later that, quote, Lamont's lawyers later called that unduly suggestive, meaning police were trying to get witnesses to choose him out of the lineup. That's exactly what they were doing.
Yeah, that's what they did.
So Ruby did know a boy named Lamont, but it was not Lamonte McIntyre. In fact, Ruby and this Lamont were complete strangers. Once again, an eyewitness never met the man being accused of this. Lamont's new attorney, Cheryl, stated, quote, this witness provided in a taped statement my client's last name, a man she did not know and had never heard of, which raises the very interesting question, who gave her his name?
That's true.
They had never met. So how would she know what his last name is for her to make a taped witness statement with it?
Right.
Another fact that was uncovered was that Ruby had changed her description of the shooter. So originally, if you remember, her description was he was a tall, skinny black man in all black with slicked back hair. But then she seen Lamont's photo in the lineup. Her description was the same except for his hair. It went from being slicked back to now being short, like Lamont's was. Once the trial came, Ruby realized that he wasn't the right person. By this time, she'd even remembered the Lamonts that her niece had dated, that Lamont, his last name. His name was Lamont Drain. She'd even said that on the stand. The inconsistency in her statement compared to her testimony alone should have taken away her reliability as a witness. But Tara Moorhead explained it away. She said the two men looked like identical twins. Yep. I couldn't find a picture of this other Lamont, but according to all of my sources, they look nothing alike. You can very clearly tell these two apart. And then, spoiler alert, Lamont Drain wasn't even in town the day of the murders. So it was just an honest misidentification.
Right.
Which it happens. Which, of course, we don't put any blame on Ruby. She was a witness. She was standing outside of her very own house when this shooting happened. So in a chaotic, traumatic situation, it's very easy to get mixed up. She witnessed a double murder in front of her very own home. I mean, literally, like, it was catty corner across the street from her front porch where this happened. So it's very easy for her brain to see a person and try to connect it just to make sense of it.
Right. She was traumatized.
Exactly. And that's how trauma works. Your brain is just trying to make sense of it. And a lot of times you misremember things. That's why you can't solely rely on eyewitness testimony. But she did try to make her mistake right. But nobody would listen. And that's not her fault.
Right.
So as Cheryl said, in order to put pressure on and manipulate someone, simply all you have to do is take a person who has just witnessed a traumatizing, horrific event, sit them down and talk to them. You'll be able to get whatever you want out of them, be it true or not.
And that's what they did.
Yep. So according to Kansas City Star, Lamonte's team would go on to collect over 15 affidavits from criminals and their cronies all the way to local police officers. And each one of them pointed to Roger Golubski as a crooked and dirty cop. So with this, Golubski is accused of several awful things. And among those accusations is one that he used his position of authority to pressure black women and girls into having sex with him. I know, I wish everybody could see that look you just made.
He's disgusting.
That's the same face that I had. Yeah. Yeah. It just gets worse. We haven't even gotten into the details of it. Yeah.
Oh, God.
So Alan Jenerick, a retired FBI agent, investigated Golubski for years. And he said in one of those affidavits that he gave, quote, as my investigation uncovered, he used the authority of his position to extort sexual favors from black females. These women complied with his demands because they knew they would be arrested if they said no. The women were powerless. Golubski exploited them. And it was later discovered that Ruby Mitchell was one of these women. So in Centurion's report, they stated, quote, Ruby had a reason to fear him and succumb to his influence in identifying Lamonte McIntyre as the shooter. And this can be seen in her testimony against Golubski. So as I said earlier, he had drove Ruby to the station to give her statement about the murder. But what I didn't tell you was what she had testified to about this drive. Golubski made sexual advances towards her, made her uncomfortable, and made her feel pressure. So I've told you about who was in the case, who was involved in it. But just as much as it is about them, it's equally about who was not and what was not involved. So the biggest bit of information that was not included was the fact that the lead prosecutor, Tara Moorhead, never revealed the brief relationship that she had previously had with Judge Burdett, the sitting judge on the trial. So this relationship did end well before the trial began, but it's still a huge conflict of interest.
Right.
And one of them should have disclosed it and recused him or herself, but they didn't. Another omission discovered was that there was another witness to the murder. That was Josephine Quinn, who was Nico Quinn's mother, and she was in almost the exact same spot that Nico was in at the time of the shooting. Because remember, Nico was going to her mom's house,
Right.
which was right there. Detective Golubski had interviewed her, but it had come out that when he showed her the same photo lineup that he showed Ruby and Nico, she didn't identify anyone. Following this, at some point, Josephine had went down to the courthouse to see if her testimony would be helpful in any way. Tara Moorhead told her no. And while Josephine was there, she had seen Lamonte for the first time, and she knew that he was the wrong guy. So she went to Tara and told her, that's not him. He's not the shooter. But Tara ignored her, saying, quote, it's in the jury's hands now.
Oh, that's bogus.
Yep. Then we have Nico's sister, Stacy Quinn, who was also a witness and who, in fact, had the closest view to the murder out of every witness identified. Do you think she was put on the stand to testify?
No, not at all.
Worse, she was never interviewed.
What?
Yep. Police never interviewed her. Cheryl wrote in a legal filing, quote, "The failure of detectives to interview Stacy is inexplicable." Detectives wrote in their notes that Stacy was unavailable, but that wasn't true. She was there on scene the day it happened. Yeah. And honestly, we all know why they didn't interview her, okay? But if you think that's why, you'd be wrong. In an affidavit, it came out that most people in Stacy's family knew that she and Detective Golubsky had been in a sexual relationship since the mid-'80s, when Stacy was between the ages of 16 and 17 years old, and Golubsky was in his late 20s or early 30s. So at a minimum, he's 10 years older than her. And they had begun a sexual relationship when she was a minor. Then you put that with his power of authority. There was no way this man was going to let Stacy be a documented witness. Despite this dynamic between the two and the lack of effort from investigators, Stacy still tried to share what she knew. 2 years after Lamonte's conviction in 1996, Stacy took the stand for the first time in a hearing to determine if Lamonte had received a fair trial or not. Here, she told the judge that she was certain of Lamonte's innocence, but the judge was none other than Judge Burdett. So the judge that oversaw the trial is the one that gets to decide if his own trial was fair. Like, someone please make that make sense. So no surprise, he writes Stacy's testimony off, saying, quote, "She is a felon. She's a habitual drug user." That means she's a liar.
Right.
Yeah, I know. Someone please make this make sense. So ultimately, he refuses to give Lamonte a new trial. So now we're going to fast forward a decade. We're now in 2016, and Lamonte has been incarcerated for 22 years. His attorney, Cheryl, files a new motion to vacate Lamonte's conviction. In her motion, she included every affidavit that her team had collected. As a result, an evidentiary hearing was held in October of 2017. And this hearing, thank God, had a new presiding judge.
Finally.
Right. So the judge listens to witness after witness, including members of Donald and Donnell's family, all testifying that they all believe Lamonte is innocent. So even the victims' families didn't believe he did it. So 23 years and 1 day after Lamonte was convicted of 2 counts of murder, the judge vacates his conviction. 41-year-old Lamonte McIntyre is now a free man. And the first thing he says after stepping outside the walls and fences of a prison in 23 years is, quote, "It's nice outside."
I can't believe it took that long.
Yep. So this case shows just how brutal our criminal justice system is and the reality of how many bad people run it. This all leaves the accused extremely vulnerable, and their rights most times are just ignored. In this case, aside from witness statements, they had a 20-minute interview with Lamonte himself. They had 20 minutes and eyewitness accounts. That's it. No search warrants, no evidence, no weapon. And yet, they were still able to steal 23 years of this man's life away from him. And for years, the ones that took part in denying Lamonte a fair trial, their lives went on without consequence. Golubsky remained a detective. Tara Moorhead was promoted to federal prosecutor, all while Lamonte sat in prison fighting for his freedom. But eventually, they both would pay a heavy price. So last year, in April of 2024, the Kansas City Supreme Court issued an order of disbarment against Tara. After that, she surrendered her law license. She is no longer able to work as a lawyer in any way. According to KCUR, there were 2 different U.S. Department of Justice investigations into her misconduct. Far too long, in my opinion, but I guess at least they're doing something. As for Roger Golubski, he didn't just lose his job. In 2021, Lamont filed a lawsuit against the local government and the department over his conviction. This suit included the initials of women who claimed to have been victimized by Golubski while he was a Kansas City detective. What do you think that number is?
I don't want to know. Because it's got to be outrageous.
There were 70 different sets of initials on that list.
Wow.
Yep. In 2022, that lawsuit settled for $12.4 million. That same year, Golubski was arrested and charged with 6 counts of deprivation of civil rights. And Lamont's case was not the only one that focused on this disgraced detective. In 2023, 5 Black women filed a 138-page lawsuit that accused the county government of allowing Golubski and his fellow officers to, quote, kidnap, coerce, pressure, sexually assault, and rape Black women in violation of clearly established constitutional rights. And you would not have seen this coming. One of those women demanding that they get justice was none other than Nico Quinn.
Wow.
There was also a federal conspiracy case that had been taking a look at Golubski as well. This case alleged that he was deeply involved with the local drug scene while he was a local cop. One of his several co-defendants in this case, none other than Cecil Brooks, the drug dealer that claimed to have ordered the hit on Donald and Donnell.
I didn't see that coming.
Oh, yeah. This case is all kinds of curveballs coming at you.
Mm-hmm.
So Lamont's mother went on to live with guilt over what happened to her son. She was quoted saying that she believed if she had only given in to Golubski, just given him what he wanted, then her son would not have gone to jail, let alone spend 23 years of his life fighting for his freedom.
That's sad.
Yep. The most disturbing part of the allegations listed in the suit is that Golubski had physically and sexually assaulted girls as young as 13. And him, along with his co-defendants, trafficked them to other men. If convicted, Golubski faces a maximum sentence of life. All of this came after he had already retired, after he had spent 35 years on the police force. Golubski has been accused of everything from sexual assault to framing people of murder to committing murder himself. He was set to begin trial in December of 2024. But the first day of his trial, he was a no-show. The judge, of course, issued a warrant for his arrest, and the police went looking for him. When they arrived at his house, they found Roger Golubski dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Many of his victims had hoped that a trial leading to a conviction would finally give them something. Justice, safety, maybe even some peace. But in the wake of his death, they're left to grapple with what happens now for themselves, the police department, and maybe even the whole city. Because there are stories that still need to be told. There's still truth waiting to come out. And now, they may never be heard, and his victims may never see justice. Oh, there's one more thing I forgot. Lamont's original attorney, Gary Long, you remember this fucking wackadoodle? His incompetent ass was disbarred a few years after Lamont's trial for violating Kansas rules concerning competence. They eventually reinstated him, but he was once again suspended for not paying taxes, then reinstated, and then again in the 2010s was disbarred for misconduct.
It took him that long to figure out?
Yep. Like, it took you decades to figure out that he is an incompetent wackadoodle fucking, I don't know, whatever he is over here. Like, Seriously, get it together. Like, ugh. Okay, so officially, the double murder of Donald Ewing and Donnell Quinn remains unsolved to this day. Nico Quinn continues to seek justice for her cousin, and tragedy once again hit the Quinn family. In 2000, her sister Stacy Quinn was murdered, and Nico also believes that the man convicted of her sister's murder did not do it. A big part of why she believes that is, no fucking shock here, the detective on Stacy's case was none other than Roger Golubsky, and the lead prosecutor, Tara Moorhead. So there could be another man sitting in prison for a murder he didn't commit. Don't know. So on the heels of Lamont's exoneration in 2018, Kansas passed a law that compensated those wrongfully convicted with $65,000 for every year that they were behind bars. With this law now passed, Lamont did not just receive his own private settlement, which, like I said before, was $12.4 million. He's also compensated with this law, which gives Lamont another $1.5 million. Total, Lamont receives $13.9 million when it is all said and done. It's obviously nowhere near what he should have gotten.
Right.
But I guess it's a start. I guess, if that's what you want to call it. So, Lamont said that readjusting to life outside of prison, coupled with the trauma from the entire thing, has been a very complicated process. In 2020, he told a local reporter, quote, "People see me on social media, in the streets, at the store, and feel like, okay, he's happy, he's smiling, that nightmare of his is over, right? But I'm left with the side effects of it. I'm still putting together my life in that kind of way, the emotional side. This brings a lot of peace of mind to me, knowing I'm free like everyone else. I can pass a background check. No one's looking at me and seeing the things I was in prison for. It feels so good to know that I have my life back, to be free. It's something I can't put into words," end quote. Lamont has went on to co-create a nonprofit organization with Daryl Burton, who was also wrongfully convicted of a murder he did not commit. The organization is called Miracle of Innocence. According to their website, their mission is, quote, "free the innocent and provide care when they come home." I want to end Lamont's case with a quote from himself. Quote, "I'm a guy who sees a fire and I want to put it out. If it's too big for me to put out by myself, I kind of expect my community to help me put it out. Wrongful convictions are way out of control. It started as a bushfire and now it's spread. My whole thing is just trying to gain the right amount of awareness to change it." And that is the story of the wrongful conviction of Lamonte McIntyre.
That story's crazy. That's so sad.
Yeah, a lot of things you don't expect in that one.
Right.
Yeah. So if anyone would like to donate or get more information or volunteer, I have the links for Centurion and Miracle of Innocence in the description of the episode. I'm also going to put them on the Facebook page too. That way they're easy to find and all that. You don't have to go down a Google rabbit hole like I did. I tend to do that a lot. Oh. Okay. Are we ready for our second one today?
Yep.
Okay, let's do it. So for this case, we're going to go to my home state of North Carolina and close to where I grew up. About 35 minutes from where I grew up, to be exact. So, imagine you're told that the police are looking for you and that they have warrants for your arrest. You know you haven't done anything wrong, so you're confused on what they could have arrest warrants for. But you want to do the right thing. So, you head to the station, you talk to police to find out what's going on. You get there, you tell them, "Hey, heard you're looking for me." You sit and you wait for the detective that's assigned to your case. Once he comes out, he tells you that you're in big trouble, but won't tell you what you did. Even after pleading with him and offering to take a lie detector test to clear your name, he still refuses to tell you what you've done. And instead, tells you to be quiet because everything you say can be used against you in court. You're a black man being accused of a serious crime, but you have no idea what that crime is. This is one of the most famous wrongful conviction cases in the U.S. A black man is arrested and convicted because of cross-racial identification bias, misconduct, tunnel vision, and good old-fashioned racism. I'm going to tell you about the wrongful conviction of Willie Grimes. So on Saturday, October 24th of 1987, 69-year-old Carrie Elliott was at her Hickory, North Carolina home. She had just taken her blood pressure medication and laid out her church clothes. She was sitting on her couch, clipping coupons, and was about to go to bed when she hears a knock on her door. Carrie was a 5-foot-tall white woman who weighed less than 100 pounds. She lived in an area known as Little Berlin, which was a few small duplexes near I-40, about an hour from Charlotte. Carrie had lived here for the last 2 years and hated it. But now that her husband had passed, the neighborhood made her feel even more nervous than it had before. Mr. Elliott had passed less than a year before our case began. And now without him in this not-so-good area, she rarely left her small apartment. She was considered to be too old for public housing, so she couldn't move in. So, obviously, she was very hesitant on opening the door. Because aside from the nervousness she felt, no one ever visited her other than her son, daughter-in-law, and her neighbor, Linda McDowell. But she slowly opened the door anyway, just enough to peer out through the screen door. Standing in front of her door was a 6-foot-tall black man. Right away, Carrie was alarmed, and she tried to quickly shut the door, but the man burst his way into her apartment. It gets a little rough here, okay? He pulls a switchblade, shoved her onto the couch, where he rapes her. He then drug her into her bedroom and rapes her again. Carrie didn't scream or fight him off. She was frozen in fear. When it was over, she simply told him she needed to use the bathroom. He stood up, stating he was hungry, and asked her what she had in her fridge. Yeah, I know.
Who does that?
Right? Thank you. Let me just... Ugh. So she followed the man to the kitchen, telling him that her friend would be coming over soon, and he should leave. He said to her, quote, "Mason, I saw Mason leave. The apartment's empty. There's no one to help you." Hearing the man that had just assaulted her say Mason's name shook her, and she wondered if the two had been friends. But before she could say anything more or ask him a question, the man took an apple and a bunch of bananas out of a fruit bowl and left, letting the door slam shut on his way out without another word. So Carrie was shaken, obviously, so shaken that she had forgotten the number to call the police. So instead, she called her son and his wife. They called the police and rushed her home. Police arrived less than 20 minutes later. She described her attacker as a black man who stood at about 6 foot tall, weighed around 220 to 225 pounds, who she believed to be about 35 years old. She said he was very dark-skinned and had an afro. Carrie said he was wearing a green shirt, but that he took that off during her assault. She was then taken to Catawba Memorial Hospital, where she was examined, photographed, and a rape kit was done. By 1 a.m., she was released in the care of her relatives. While she was at the hospital, police were searching her apartment and yard. They collected several hairs from her bed. They took fruit from the bowl in her kitchen. They found 2 banana peels outside her back door. But there's always one fucking guy. But Detective Steve Hunt, the man that had found the banana peels, did not collect them.
Of course not.
Yep.
That'd been too easy.
There's always one.
Right.
He did, though, pick up an apple core that was found out on the street. But he threw it away at the police station.
What?
Yeah. So the next day, on October 25th, Sergeant Steve Brandt had showed Carrie a photo lineup which included a man named Albert Lindsay Turner, who was known for committing assaults in the area. Not only did this man have a long record of similar crimes, He was also the right height, weight, and he also had an afro at the time. However, the photo in the lineup was old. And in that photo, he had cornrows instead of an afro. So Carrie couldn't make an identification, which that happens a lot in sexual assault cases. There's most times the victims can't make an identification for several reasons. So 2 days later, on the 26th, Carrie was talking about the attack with her neighbor, Linda McDowell. Linda said that she may know the identity of the man, but said that she would only speak to the police about it. That's my first red flag with this lady right there. I think I might know who attacked you, but I'm not going to tell you. I'm only going to tell the police. Listen, Linda. Okay? You need to tell me what you know, lady. Red flag. I need to get me one of them little red flags to...
And start holding it up.
Yep.
Put it over people's... You see them?
Exactly. Right here. It's a walking red flag here. Okay, anyway. So Carrie called the police and reported what Linda had said to her. By this time, Carrie had also remembered that her attacker had either had a mole or a bump on the side of his face. She wasn't sure which, but it was one of those. And that she may have scratched him because she had realized that one of her nails had broken. These were all details that she had not remembered before, which that's normal. Traumatic things like this, they kind of pieces together.
They come back slow.
Exactly. What Carrie didn't know was that Linda was a police informant. To be specific, Linda was an informant for Sergeant Steve Brandt, one of the investigating officers that had questioned Carrie 2 nights prior, and the one that had shown her the lineup. The same day that Carrie reported what Linda said, Linda had called the station and asked if there was a reward in the Elliott case, which there was. Crime Stoppers was offering a $1,000 reward for information on her attack. That would lead to the arrest.
Right.
After hearing this, Linda reported that she knew a man that fit the description. She said she had seen him around the area that night wearing a green shirt and said that he had a mole on his face. This man was Willie Grimes. Sergeant Brand then took a new lineup to Carrie that now included Grimes, but did not include Albert Turner. In fact, Willie's photo was in the exact spot that Turner's had previously been in position 2. So they took one photo out and swapped it.
Right, swapped it with the other one.
Yep. Rather than put them 2 together in the same lineup. Yeah. So this time, Carrie chose Willie Grimes as her attacker, even though she said she thought his hair was long. So she was even kind of iffy on it. But he was the closest one that looked like her attacker from what she could remember. But Willie didn't fit that description. Or the stature of the man she said attacked her. Willie stood at 6'2". So I could see 6 foot, 6'2". I mean, I'm 5 foot tall. I can't tell a fucking difference.
Yeah.
You're tall. That's all I know. But he only weighed about 165 pounds. So he was much smaller than her attacker. Nor did he have an afro. The only thing that he did have, aside from the possible height, was that he did have a mole on his face. That was it. But damn it, how many other people do?
I know. A lot of people do.
So Willie was tall, but he was actually taller than her attacker. Which, like we just said, you could easily mix up those 2 extra inches. Especially if you're a woman that stands up 5 foot tall. But he was very lean for his height. To me, it's obvious that Linda McDowell had planted the seed into Carrie's mind that Willie was the man that had attacked her. All in an effort to get her hands on that reward money. Carrie had no memory of her attacker having any kind of major noticeable scars anywhere. Not the day of the attack, not at this point several days later. Willie had a very prominent scar on his collarbone, which she would have seen when he removed his shirt. And the biggest thing that would have definitely been noticed. Willie was missing 3 fingers.
Yeah, you would have noticed that.
Yep. They had taken fingerprints from inside the apartment and off of a banana which was left inside the fruit bowl. Those prints did not match Willie. And they didn't test those prints against Carrie's to see if they were hers. That's typically a number one go-to. Test everybody in the house first.
Right.
Yeah. Despite all this, warrants were issued for Willie Grimes based solely on Carrie's shaky identification and Linda McDowell's tip. Willie spent the evening of October 24th at a friend's house. This friend was Rachel Wilson. His girlfriend, Brenda Smith, had dropped him off there on her way to work because Willie didn't drive. He had had 2 prior DUIs, and other than that, his record was clean. And he definitely didn't have a history of violent behavior. So he spent this night drinking and playing cards with Rachel and 7 other friends while he waited for Brenda to get off work. The next morning, she picked him up. Right after her overnight shift had ended, they spent the rest of the weekend together. As usual, Willie went to work on Monday and saw Brenda again Tuesday morning because they had worked 2 separate shifts. This was when she had told him the police had come to the home looking for him. Willie had Brenda drive him straight to the police station because he wasn't worried. He hadn't done anything wrong. He walked up to the front desk, told the receptionist who he was, and that they were looking for him. He waited patiently until Detective Steve Hunt came walking down the hall towards him. Willie asked Detective Hunt why he was looking for him, but all the detective told him was that he was in big trouble. Willie insisted he did nothing wrong. After his DUIs from a few years prior, Willie had stayed out of trouble. He had even made the choice to not drive to avoid it ever happening again. He swore to Hunt that he did nothing wrong and would even take a lie detector test to prove it. To this, Hunt told him to stop talking and anything he said could be used against him. Willie was then booked and fingerprinted. This was when he found out why. He was charged with 2 counts of rape and 1 count of kidnapping. For these, he was never formally questioned.
They never questioned him about it?
Nope.
Just charged him.
Yep. He didn't even know what he was there for until after he was fingerprinted. That's when they told him what he was arrested for. So meanwhile, Rachel and the other 7 friends that Willie had spent that night with went in and gave sworn depositions. Okay. Which I want to say, I don't know if you've ever had to give depositions, but
Yeah.
as someone that you have, okay. So like I've been interrogated. I gave multiple depositions. It is not easy.
No.
It is a very hard position to be in. And obviously, like, our situations are vastly different than what his is and what his friends are. But it's extremely difficult to sit there and have things be said to you that isn't true. You respond to questions or make a statement and those words are twisted. And then you have to not only defend your own character, but the character of a friend because you know what's being said isn't true. Then you have, like, in the back of your head, you know all of that is being recorded. You have to sit and answer questions, and in some cases, like in my case, you have to sit and recount very painful and traumatizing things. So it's victimizing and re-traumatizing in so many different ways. And then you have these 8 people who know their friend is innocent. He wasn't even near there. They're having to go in and do this. Like, the fuck are you guys doing? Ugh. Okay. Anyway, now that I've went on
a rant.
Yep, there we go. Let's get back to the case. So Willie had a very clear alibi. Brenda Smith had said in her deposition and even insisted that after she'd picked up Willie, the 2 had slept together. They were in a relationship. That she did not see any kind of scratches or any kind of indications that he was involved in any assault after she had dropped him off at his friend's house. But even with these alibis and Carrie Elliott's shaky ID of Willie, They still had Linda McDowell saying that she had seen him in the neighborhood that night. Willie knew he'd never be able to raise the money for his bond, so he sat in jail waiting for his day in court. While in jail, he held on to hope that once that day came, there was no way the trial would continue because the victim could not identify Willie. But things for Willie would not be that simple. His trial began in July of 1988. On the first day, the small, frail Carrie Elliott took the stand. Assistant DA Bill Johnson questioned her. She recalled the horrible night vividly, and her testimony sounded certain on what happened that night. So she was asked if she recognized her attacker there in the courtroom, to which she said yes. And she could because Carrie had seen Willie at the probable cause hearing, which isn't supposed to happen. And by this point, she had also seen a photo of Willie. To this, defense attorney Ed DeTorres objected. A sidebar was requested where Johnson requested that the jury be removed in order to consider the evidence, to which the judge agreed. So once the jury left the room, the DA had showed Carrie the photo lineup, the same one she'd been shown before. And he asked her if she recognized anyone in it. She said, "No, sir." To which he told her she said she identified her attacker there in the room. And then asked her, quote, "Do you recognize any of the pictures as the one you identified?" Carrie replied that she had seen one like it. The DA showed the judge the lineup, which had 6 photos, each numbered 1 through 6. He then asked Carrie which numbered photograph looked like her attacker. But instead of answering him and picking a number, she pointed to Willie and said it looks like him over there. The DA asked her again if any of the photos looked like the man that attacked her. She responded that the ones she had seen were arranged in little blocks like that one that she was looking at now. So he again asked her if she was able to tell them whether any of the men in the lineup was the one she identified. She responded with, quote, "Hard to tell any different." Frustrating, but she is an older woman. So I want to try to take that into account. I don't have nothing else. So the DA, knowing that did not help his case at all, he moved on. Okay, like this is not helping. Let's move to the next thing. So he asked her how certain she was that she had made the correct identification. She told him she was positive that she had. He asked if that man was in the courtroom, and she said he was. That he was sitting next to the guy wearing the red shirt. So to give everyone an image, okay? Willie was, of course, sitting at the defense table, which is in front of the stand as a normal courtroom is set up. And of course, Willie was not wearing his jailhouse oranges. Like any trial, he's wearing nice clothes. Willie was wearing a red button-down shirt, and Carrie had just identified the man sitting next to him, defense attorney Ed DeTorres, as her attacker in open court.
What?
Yeah. So the judge throws out the photo ID, which, again, Carrie's an old woman, right? She's old. She was traumatized. She made a mistake. I don't feel like Carrie purposely picked the wrong
she didn't
person.
do it on purpose.
No. Like, it seems that way. It comes across that way.
Right.
She did not purposely pick the wrong person. She was an old woman, and several people manipulated her and took advantage of her situation.
And she was very traumatized on top of that.
Exactly.
That would do a lot to you.
She really didn't have anybody in her corner.
No, not at all.
So the trial for Willie went on for 4 days.
4 days?
Yes, 4 days. So even though the photo ID was thrown out, even though Carrie had picked the wrong man sitting in the courtroom, even though Willie had 8 alibi witnesses and his girlfriend took the stand as a character witness, and even though there wasn't a shred of evidence, not physical or otherwise, tying him to the scene or the attack, Willie Grimes was convicted and sentenced to life in prison plus 9 years for kidnapping by a jury that contained 11 white and only 1 black juror.
Of course. Yeah. Go figure.
Yeah. So Willie's carted off to prison. It was case closed as far as anyone was concerned, but it wasn't for Willie. He proclaimed his innocence while he sat in prison, denying any program that would give him a chance at an early release. Mainly one that came out in 1994 that focused on therapy and rehab for sexual offenders. Again and again, Willie refused to partake in any such program. He said to participate in any of them would be to admit guilt and to admit that he raped Kelly Elliott, and he refused to lie, even if that meant he died in prison. Over the years, Willie had become religious, and he says it was his faith in Jehovah that gave him the strength to never back down or admit wrongdoing. Willie was not a liar, nor would he go through life on the outside labeled a rapist. In August 2017, Willie told NPR that he would rather die before he would lie to get out of prison, and then still have that conviction on his name for the rest of his life. He never quit fighting, though. In 2001, the General Assembly enacted a post-conviction DNA testing statute. So this statute allowed states to use grants in order to fund DNA testing for cases. It also allowed prosecutors to review convictions and find cases that may benefit from new DNA testing. Because, before DNA became a thing, they didn't even collect it. And even now, still today, there's DNA that technology isn't good enough to test yet. So it's just sitting there.
Right.
And that's what this statute does, is it allows, there's people in prison and we had the evidence and we're pretty sure it's this one. But in cases like this, where it wasn't tested, this statute allows prosecutors to go back and have that DNA retested or tested for the first time. So Willie, finding out about this, fought for the testing to be done in his case. So this was when he found out that all the physical evidence in his case, including the rape kit done on Carrie Elliott, had been destroyed.
It was destroyed?
Yep. Because it was case closed. They didn't need it. Yep. So then in 2003, Willie's lawyer was finally able to get his case in front of Christine Muma. She's the director of the North Carolina Center for Actual Innocence. So Christine began her daunting investigation, and while she did, she helped form the Innocence Inquiry Commission, also known as the IIS, in 2006. This commission is an 8-person panel. They investigate cases of actual innocence with 8 members on the panel, consisting of a prosecutor, a criminal defense attorney, a sheriff, a superior court judge, a victim rights advocate, a member of the public, and 2 discretionary appointments. So basically, everyone from all walks of the legal field
is on there.
So this commission evaluates the case that is brought to them. They then vote on whether they think the case is actually innocent and if they should submit to have like a special tribunal to then review the case. If they vote and the special tribunal comes, it consists of 3 judges. If the 3-judge panel unanimously finds that if there is clear and convincing evidence of actual innocence, then the convicted is exonerated and released immediately. So since the panel is a state-funded agency, they have powers that others don't. Investigators are able to compel testimony thanks to subpoenas and then gather other evidence to prove innocence. The IIC uses this to their advantage. They subpoena everything that has to do with Willie's case. And eventually, they got their hands on the personal files of Detective Hunt. And if you don't remember, he was the lead detective on Willie's case. The DA denied having this in evidence, and he wasn't lying. Detective Hunt never turned it over to the DA like he was supposed to. Because each detective has like their own little, personal file on the case.
Right.
They're supposed to turn all of it over to the DA. When it's now in the DA's hands, we're done investigating. He didn't do that. In that file, they found the original lineup shown to Carrie. On it, Willie's name was the only name written in reverse on the back where Carrie would have been able to see it. So you can assume, seeing that, Carrie believed, oh, well, he's the suspect.
Yeah.
So in a way, it helped influence her to pick him out of the line. But they knew that wasn't going to be enough. So they kept digging. Christine Muma and Kendra Montgomery of the IIC worked tirelessly looking for evidence that would prove Willie's innocence. And they finally caught a break after a phone call from a clerk in Hickory. The clerk had found the original fingerprint card taken from the food bowl that the attacker had touched. Those prints didn't match Willie. With that find, they discovered the prints were never put into APHIS, which is an automatic fingerprint identification system. And once it was put into APHIS, it got a match. That match was to none other than that of Albert Lindsay Turner, the original suspect and the man's photo that Willie's had replaced in the lineup.
That's crazy.
Yep. So the original suspect the whole time. So over the years, Albert Turner had been charged with assault on, are you ready? 23 separate women. He served time for each of those and even went on to assault more women after Carrie. Following this discovery, his DNA was found. Now that has been entered into the North Carolina DNA database.
Right.
Which that database had become active in North Carolina, and then in North Carolina in the late 80s, early 90s. This DNA search connected Turner to the sexual assault of a 12-year-old girl in 1973.
What?
Mm-hmm.
12 years old.
Yep. So they had the guy. They had him.
Right.
Yep. And more women went on to be assaulted and victimized because they decided Willie was the guy. So why was Willie convicted if the evidence pointed to Turner? Well, originally they did like him for the case. They believed it was Turner. He was the original suspect. He had a similar record. He fit the description. He was in the original lineup. But because he was now older, the photo was misleading. And so Carrie wasn't able to identify him because he looked different. But even without her ID of him, he still fit the fucking description.
To a T.
He had the record. The evidence pointed to him. So why did they simply drop him? Okay. So you tell me if you think that the fact that one of Albert's relatives being on the force could have had something to do with it.
Most definitely. Yes.
It's not just any old relative. It was his brother.
Well, of course, then, yes.
Robert Turner was an officer of the Hickory Police Department when the rape of Carrie Elliott happened. Not only was Robert the brother of Albert Turner, but he was also close friends with none other than our favorite detective, Steve Hunt. And if that isn't bad enough, none other than our witness, Linda McDowell, knew Albert. You remember whenever Carrie recanted that her attacker had made a comment about seeing Mason leave his apartment?
Yes.
Mason is Linda's husband.
What?
Yep. Mm-hmm. And none of it was a coincidence. Albert Turner had actually been at the McDowell's household, Carrie's neighbor, on October 24th of 1987, during the day, because he was friends with the McDowell. There was never any testimony that flat out said Linda was only after the reward money or that she was trying to shift blame away from her friend. Steve Hunt had also denied the allegations that his relationship with Turner had anything to do with the arrest of Willie. But I think we all know otherwise. That, or it's just that he's just lazy and he's just a plain old mess. But he held on to evidence. He threw out an apple core found at the scene. He did not collect banana peels that were found. And then you have the fact that he had Sergeant Brandt on his side because Linda McDowell was his informant. It all seems very deliberate. So this could very well be a classic case of tunnel vision. And once they got Willie's name, they dismissed any other possible suspect and rushed to close the case. But I feel like we all know better than that. Playing devil's advocate, though. So all of it is no surprise that on October 4th, 2012, it took the 3-judge panel of the IIC less than 30 minutes to decide that Willie Grimes was innocent after he had served more than 24 years in prison. Judge David Lee read the panel decision that dismissed all charges and ordered that Willie's name be removed from the sex offender registry immediately. Lee then went on to paraphrase Reverend Martin Luther King's famous speech from 1963, saying, quote, "Willie Grimes is free at last." And the current DA had no objection to this. Christina Muma, who had worked Willie's case for 9 years, now was finally able to walk her client out of prison as a free man. Carrie Elliott was unable to see justice be served for her or for Willie. She passed away in the winter of 1989, just a year after Willie was convicted. Albert Turner was arrested on September 24th, 2012, but not for the rape of Carrie. Instead, for the rape of the 12-year-old girl from 1973 that his DNA had matched to. He then died in 2016 before he could ever be brought to trial for his attack on Carrie. After Willie was released, he was not bitter. Even after suffering through life in prison for 24 years for a crime he did not commit, he was forgiving to those that had done him wrong and to Carrie Elliott herself. He nor any of his attorneys ever blamed her. She had suffered a brutal attack, and she was not deliberate or malice in her idea of him. He understood that it would be confusing during the time before, after, and during his trial. His attorney was able to convince him to sue the city, though. But he never wanted money out of it. He just wanted his freedom and his name cleared. She wanted him to sue to set an example so that maybe this wouldn't happen again, hoping that the city would learn from the damage that railroading black men causes. In the end, Willie sued. He was awarded $3 million against the city of Hickory, North Carolina. He was also compensated $50,000 a year for 15 years following his release from the state of North Carolina. The money itself meant very little to Willie. He had lost his mother and 5 siblings while he was incarcerated. And the chance that he had to marry Brenda Smith was long gone. He had lost the best parts of his life, but at least now he was free. He went on to live in Lawndale, North Carolina, where he saw his surviving sister nearly every day. As racism has been pervasive in the criminal justice system here in the U.S. throughout history. A study conducted by the National Registry of Exonerations showed the average minimum term for black men and women is 29 years, while it is 19 for white men and women. This same study also on guilty pleas, when 99% of rape exonerees went to trial, which means most innocent rarely plead guilty. They want their day in court.
Right.
This study also noted that black sexual assault defendants who insisted and fought for their innocence were punished more harshly for doing so compared to white defendants that did the same. Which that's exactly what we saw last week with the exonerated 5.
Yes.
Black defendants on average received a term of 32 years, while their white counterparts averaged 19 for the same crime. A black inmate serving time for sexual assault is 3.5 times more likely to actually be innocent than a white sexual assault inmate. This is often due to misidentification by white victims in these violent crimes. These cases represent at least half of all misidentifications by eyewitnesses, and most lead to exonerations. Assaults on white women by black men are actually a small minority of all sexual assaults that happen here in the U.S. Most sexual assaults are committed by someone you know. Most of them are not committed by strangers like many people believe. So as a side note, before I end the case, I want to point out the fact that there are still 17 U.S. states that do not compensate for wrongful conviction. Like, I don't get it.
I don't
You
either.
fuck up, you convict somebody wrongfully, you should compensate them for that. Because that's an entire life that you just took from them.
The least you could do.
Exactly. You don't think they deserve it. Oh, I'm sorry, that's all they deserve to you? Like, the But yeah, 17 states still do not compensate for wrongful conviction. Yep. But that's it. This is what I got this week. That's the wrongful convictions of Lamonte McIntyre and Willie Grimes.
Those are good. Those were good ones.
Yep. Now you see why I couldn't decide which one to do.
Yeah.
Yep.
They were both really good. Crazy.
Mm-hmm. I
couldn't imagine.
They were doozies.
I couldn't imagine going through that.
No. I don't know how, like, you could live knowing that you're innocent. Well, I guess I could. I guess it's just the I'm innocent, I didn't do this, I'm going to prove it kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I guess
determination.
Yeah, that determination probably is what gets most of them through it, I would think.
Well, if I was innocent sitting in prison and facing life, I would want to do everything I could to prove that I was innocent.
Yeah.
Like you would think that would drive you.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what, I could be wrong, obviously. I don't have a freaking clue. But that's probably what gets wrongful conviction inmates through it, is just knowing that there could be a chance that they could get out. And then,
Yeah.
they have families and things like that too.
If they don't turn on.
Yeah, that's true too. Because some families do. That's very true. It's just crazy. We learned a lot this month.
Yeah.
It really makes you see things through a different light. You know what I mean? Like the statistics, and like, we all know wrongful convictions happen. We all know that the racial disparities within the criminal justice system are prominent. They're there. But until you really break it down, like I've done this month, you don't realize how bad it really is. Like, it's one of those things that we know is there, but nobody ever talks about. It is something that you should be talking about it. It's not something that should be just be, oh, well, Okay. So next month is Women's History Month, Women's Appreciation Month, whatever you want to call it. I think it depends on where you live, what it's called, to be honest. So we've spent this month discussing wrongful convictions and educating more people about them. Next month, we're going to lean into the female aspect of crime. So each week next month, we're going to bring you cases all about women. I have a sneak peek. So next month, I'm going to tell you about an investigative journalist, a pinup model, a notorious thief, and a female detective.
It's going to be some good ones.
Oh, yeah. So I'm going to link all the websites that I've mentioned in today's episode for all of you that want more information, want to volunteer, want to donate, anything like that, or just if you just want to look at the website and check it out. I'm also going to post the Innocent Project website just like I did the last 2 episodes. Those will be in the description, as well as on our Facebook page. I believe that's all I got. You got anything else?
No.
All right. Well, we'll be back next week for another episode. As always, our sources and photos for this episode will be on our Facebook page. You can find that link in the episode description. Please make sure you give us a rate and a review. Don't forget to subscribe so you get notifications when these new episodes air. We hope you keep listening, and remember to
watch for monsters.
And don't kill people. Bye, y'all.
Bye, y'all.